We recognize that the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society gathers on the land of the Western Abenaki people. We respect the Abenaki spiritual relationship to the land, and we seek to honor their living traditions. We hope to learn from them how we can respect Mother Earth and each other. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on this chilly April morning as we come together to worship. My name is Julia Chant, and I am serving as the worship associate for the Reverend Barnaby Feeder. If this is your first time with us, we are the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society, a diverse group of individuals that strive to be an inclusive and welcoming community that sustains a liberal religious tradition. We aspire to be visible and active on behalf of social justice and environmental responsibility. We nurture and empower each other at all ages on our spiritual journeys, and we reach out to the larger community of which we are a part. Speaking of which, after today's service, there will be a congregation conversation during our Zoom coffee hour regarding the UUA General Assembly that is being held this summer. This year, the GA will be online, so come to today's conversation to find out how you can be involved. It always takes a team to bring each week's service together. Special thanks today to our stream team, Margie Young, and Rich Wolfson, the choir for special music, and Jordan Young for managing the Zoom room. Chuck Miller is our accompanist today, and Bobby Reese did our Time for All Ages. For anyone who did not have time to submit a yellow card for today's service, there's still time to add those milestones and passages by adding them to the chat box. And if you have not already signed up to receive our newsletter, but would like to, please send an email to office@cvuus.org. Speaking of our newsletter, some of the pathways to connection that are coming up in the upcoming week are kind of exciting. We have made it to our spring new UU class, but this time around it's going to be a little bit different. And instead of having a Zoom class, because Reverend Barnaby is fully vaccinated, he's going to be hosting informal private meetings with newcomers. And this is an excellent chance to learn more about our history, how we operate, and what CVUUS offers in terms of spiritual, social action, and fellowship opportunities. There's some baking opportunities coming up as well. CVUUS has volunteered to provide homemade cookies and dessert bars for community suppers on the third Friday of each month. The April date just passed, so the next one available is going to be May 10th. You can find the sign up sheet in the newsletter. And in the baking genre, our Rhubarb Festival is coming up the last Saturday of May, which I hope is right around the corner. It'll mean it'll be warm. And we are looking for a new coordinator this year. So if anybody's interested, please reach out. And finally, on the spring cleanup, Saturday, April 24th is the Blue Jeans opportunity for a cleanup. And there are several opportunities listed in the newsletter if you're interested. Now would be a great time to turn off your phones if they're not already turned off, or otherwise known as put them in worship mode. And we can move on. Let's see. Our call to worship today is adapted from a prayer titled "A Prayer for the List of Coming Disasters," written by Carol Penner in 2019. We gather when we are reluctant to pray because we are surrounded by stress and uncertainty. We gather when we go through our days unsure when the next cause for distress will pop up, but let us come together as we go through our days trying to pretend that life as normal will continue forever. But that is harder and harder to sustain. And so we need this prayer where we lay out the disaster of climate change to you, Lord, and to each other. The losses of species never to be seen again, the bleaching of the coral reefs, the submersion of coastal regions, the dislocation of populations, the rains that don't come, and the inevitable famines, and the disaster of hearts hardening against these losses and against those who are suffering. God, will you be with us in the day of trouble, if it turns out to be an era of trouble? Are you with us in the great melting of the ice caps, in the great migrations of peoples, in the great dying of species, in the great guilt as we face our part in this list of coming disasters? We feel so small in the story of the world, yet our actions have such big consequences. Spirit of God, continue to hover over the face of the deep.
item for this morning was written by Molly Brewer.
My beloved people, I cannot pretend, and so I will not tell you that everything is okay right now, that there is no reason to be angry, that you must be optimistic or at peace. I cannot pretend these things, and so I won't tell them to you. But now our chalice is lit, and so all I ask in this moment is that you remember the words of Rebecca Parker. There is a love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all. By the light of our chalice, let us rest in this love.
Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our minds to seek what is true. Let us open our hearts to love one another, and may we walk in peace. Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our minds to seek what is true. Let us open our hearts to love one another, and may we walk in peace. Good morning. I'm Poppy, Director of Religious Exploration, and our story for today is called I Am the Storm by Jane Yolen and Hadia Stempel. Here we go. I am the storm. When the wind howled and blew, loud as a train, we had a party in the basement with Grandma, reading books and playing games with a flashlight. When the wind stopped whirling, as tornadoes always do, we picked up branches and fixed the fence. I danced round and round our front yard, howling and blowing like the wind. When the ice and snow fell, sparkling like fairy dust on the windows, and all the lights went out, we made a fire and cooked hot dogs and marshmallows. When the ice and snow stopped falling, as blizzards always do, we shoveled our walk and Mrs. Garcia's too. We built a snowman, and I tossed up big handfuls of snow that fell down on my head. When the fires burned in a forest nearby, Papa drove us to the lake. We camped out and made new friends. I picked wildflowers and tied them into bouquets. When the forest cooled, as wildflowers always do, I brought flowers to all the neighbors, while the grown-ups swept the ashes and washed windows. The air still felt hot as I swayed with my arms up like a slow, beautiful flame. We had big bowls of ice cream to cool down. When the sea swirled and roiled and rose almost into the sky, we drove away from the ocean. To my cousin's house, we pretended the bunk beds were boats high above the waves. The storm was strong, and I was scared. But when the wind and sea calmed, as hurricanes always do, we went back home. It's okay to be scared. Nature is strong and powerful, but I am strong and powerful too. I am loud like the tornado. I am wild like the blizzard. I am hot like the fire. I am fierce like the hurricane. I am the storm. And when the storm passes, as it always does, I am the calm too. So the story is a reminder, especially for the kids, that things come and go. And it actually reminded me not just of storms, but of the time right now that we're still in with COVID and masks and the way school is and not getting to see people, and all of the stuff that's really hard right now. And some of it is still scary. But like a storm, at some point it will pass. This is just a long one, right? This is the longest kind of thing like this that any of us have ever gone through, especially the kids, right? Because for kids, for you guys, it's like a big piece of your life. But like the hurricane, like the tornado, it will pass, and we're already seeing changes as things pass and move and change. So, as we go into this week, I encourage you to notice feelings that come up that are maybe really big feelings, like feeling sad or feeling scared or anxious or worried, hard feelings that might feel so big and fierce that at the time you're feeling them, they're overwhelming and they feel like they're not going to stop. And that's really scary. But they always do. They always stop at some point and change, at least, and slow down. And like the storm, they come up in us and then calm. And there's ways that you can help them calm, right? We've talked about some of those before, like counting, like noticing things around you, noticing your breath, 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, right? So have faith. Things come up, things will calm again. So I encourage you to just notice that always will happen, and that sometimes you even have the power to help it happen quicker. So my beloveds, I love you all. I miss you. And I'll see you soon. And here I think are Carl and Brett to give us an update.
Good morning, all you lovely people. The Bound for Joy canvas is in its later stages. We are trying to wrap this thing up, and I'm very happy to report that we have raised $296,500 through the generosity of pledges, and we've got you covered gifts, people giving on behalf of people who are unable to pledge this year. It's been a joy to see, a joy to work with all of the people who've helped. It's time to start thanking people. First of all, thanks to all of you who've pledged. If you haven't yet, we should really get to 300,000 now. Come on. And it's possible to do on the church website, right on the first page online, or you can call the office and get a paper form if you need one. So please do if you haven't pledged yet. Thank you so much if you have. And thank you. The thank yous I want to do today, there's many thank yous, but I want to just give you the names of our village leaders. That is the people who had direct contact with all of you. Ravel Allen, Lise Anderson, John Barstow, Dale Birdsall, Mary Conlin, Gordon Gibson, Catherine Goldsmith, Mike Greenwood, Carol Hardin, Dorothy Mammon, Chris Murphy, Doug Richards, Dinah Smith, and Marnie Wood. Thank you so much.
So this is the last presentation that we'll make.
Yep, this is it.
So we, at the very outset, we had Chris Prickett sang a train song with lyrics by Ted Shai.
Yeah.
And Francois gave us a beautiful singing testimonial.
Mm-hmm.
And then Chris and Connie sang Let the Love Flow last time. So is this the time now that, that I get to sing some Bob Dylan?
No.
Please?
No,
No.
absolutely not. Barnaby, take it away, quick.
Thank you, Brett. I know I've been waiting for years to hear Carl sing Bob Dylan during a service as well as you, but the waiting for it is even better than the song could possibly be at this point. So, he may never get to perform. We'll have to work on that. In addition to all the great generosity the congregation has displayed prospectively, pledging for what it will give for the next year, we've continued to share our offering in each service with a group that's working on things that display our values. And this has been a year of record generosity on that front as well. Our donee this month has been Common Ground Center in Starksboro, which provides camping experiences and is particularly geared towards camping experiences in the outdoors, especially for younger children who might not otherwise get those experiences. And Connor Timmons, who's the executive director of the center and also happens to be a member of the congregation, I was visiting yesterday to deliver Poppy's RE package to Connor and Neely and their 2 kids. And Connor mentioned that they're going to be having their April session this year, which they weren't able to last year. They're welcoming 40 people as of now. Maybe a couple more will sign up today. And 17 of those people are receiving full financial aid and are going to be fed for the week for the whole cost, thanks to support of CVUUS and other donors. And the summer registration is also expanding as the relaxations come through from Governor Scott on what they can do. And they have 60 people lined up for that already with a capacity of 75. And again, our support is helping them through that. So Connor said, please thank everybody for sharing their generosity with the families of Addison County so they can have that common ground experience. We're going to invite you to contribute to this effort again in our usual way in just a minute with music. But after that, there's going to be music from the choir. And I wanted to just introduce it now. It's a round by Amanda Udis Kessler that Lucy picked out. And we do a lot of work in the worshiping team to make sure that we're not delivering just white male voices that you might have heard in 19th century Unitarian Universalism. We're really spreading out our sources of music and worship readings. And Amanda Udis Kessler lives out in Colorado and works on what she calls queer sacred music. And so I want to thank Lucy for bringing this LGBTQ voice into our music program and look forward to hearing the choir after we take our offering.
justice, spirit of kindness, you have called and claimed us. We will follow, follow in your way. Ours is the work of justice, ours is the path of kindness. Spirit of justice, spirit of kindness, may we live your dream. Spirit of justice, spirit of kindness, you have called and claimed us. We will justice, spirit of kindness, follow in your ways. Spirit of justice, spirit of kindness, ours have called and claimed us. We will follow, follow in your ways. Ours is the justice, justice, ours is the path of kindness. Spirit of justice, spirit of kindness, may we live your dreams. Spirit of justice, spirit of kindness, ours have called and claimed us. Spirit of justice, ours is to live your ways. Spirit of justice, justice, ours is the path of kindness. Spirit of justice, spirit of kindness, may we live your dreams. Spirit of justice, spirit of kindness, ours has the path of kindness. We will follow, follow in your way.
Meanwhile, I'm going to invite those of you who have other things on your mind that you didn't give me to share during the milestones and passage to have a time of silence and prayer and locate them on your heart this morning. We, in silence, find our inner selves and we bring ourselves more wholly to our worship together when we take time to just feel and think. So I invite you into that space. Use it for meditation or prayer.
Today's first reading is a poem by Mary Oliver entitled Breakage. I go down to the edge of the sea. How everything shines in the morning light. The cusp of the whelk, the broken cupboard of the clam, the opened blue mussels. Moon snails, pale pink and barnacle scarred, and nothing at all, whole or shut, but tattered and split, dropped by the gulls onto the gray rocks and all the moisture gone. It's like a schoolhouse of little words, thousands of words. First, you figure out what each one means by itself, the jingle, the periwinkle, the scallop, full of moonlight. Then you begin, slowly, to read the whole story.
Thank you. Our second reading will be inside the sermon, and Julie and I will be doing it together towards the end of the sermon. Today's my last chance to talk to you this month about our theme, which we summed up in our worship calendar as simply Earth. But I've been thinking of the theme as we are human beings alive at the unique moment in the multi-billion year history of Earth, where our species is demonstrating a never before seen and growing capacity to create global catastrophes. Any religion worth its salt, just like science at its best, has to be asking, what's up with that? A little long for a theme, but maybe a little bit too short for everything we have to think about. Mary Oliver said it much more beautifully in the reading that Julia just shared with you. Surveying the scene where land and ocean meet, she finds only beautiful breakage, nothing at all whole or shut to safely house life. Everything tattered and split and drained of all life-sustaining moisture, deposited at the tidal edge where so many of life's great transitions have played out. This is our schoolhouse, she advises. And then she leaves us with our assignment. First, you figure out what each one means by itself. The jingle, the periwinkle, the scallop, full of moonlight. Then you begin slowly to read the whole story. Notice, you are to begin to read the whole story, not to rush. That's a heads up that the whole story is a direction to move toward, not a destination humans arrive at least in our lifetimes on Earth. Now I'll add something she doesn't say, but which I think we should never forget, perhaps because I'm married to an elementary school reading specialist. What we can read with comprehension has everything to do with who we are as readers. As Unitarian Universalists, one thing we try to get clear about is that many of us, perhaps even all of us, if the question is framed properly, affirm that there is a bigger story than science alone can offer us. Whether that's because of the nature of the universe itself or our own limitations doesn't matter. After all, our own limitations are part of the nature of the universe. In the end, though, my chapters of the whole story will be different in some ways and similar in others to yours. We share our humanity, but we are also different in notable ways the spirit of life wants us to notice and respect. If we have a religious bent, we will be especially drawn to the truth that there will be an element of mystery to the story Mary Oliver pointed out, and in every other one of nature's classrooms. The Bible describes heaven as a place of many rooms. Well, it's no different from Earth in that respect. All connected, all unique. Humans can fashion convincing stories by looking at shells and so much else scattered through the levels of soil and rock that through the ages have gone through cycles of being open land, ocean floor, volcanic eruptions, meteor burial grounds, and bedrock. But the relationship between all the breakage will be too complicated for us to fully reconstruct the past or predict the future. No one knows this better than the scientists among us, who give us our story prompts. Each prompt is a form of saying, here's what we see, here's what we are looking for, here's one or more things that reason suggests might be part of Earth's story. But if you want a richer story right now, it's up to you to use your faith and imagination, as we do when we aren't practicing science. Our faith calls us to be authors with a passion for bending the universe toward the three sisters of love: justice, beauty, and compassion. If we want a patch of beach to start to be the star in a story, including those three sisters of love, we fill in some things as we read the story. We do it by finishing sentences that begin like those we explored last Sunday. Because I love ... and what if ... Because I love the birds whose meals remain visible in this breakage of shells, I give thanks when I see this breakage. What if something I was doing was changing the ocean in ways that might mean this breakage would not be here in 50 years? What if many of the birds I love would appear only on the list of those we had driven to extinction? With Earth Day coming up this week, I struggled to find a non-despairing path through the environmental history story we are writing in the breakage around us. To be honest, it's impossible to isolate the environmental story in the midst of all the pandemic breakage I'm both seeing and feeling. All those pieces of our work and family life damaged by social isolation. All of those holes in hearts left by those who've died directly from the pandemic or who suffered through their last days of a loved one's death because they were isolated from them without comforting companionship. So many dreams deferred, rites of passage canceled, and caregivers traumatized. And then there's growing social justice breakage. In the early days of the pandemic, there were plenty of everybody is in it together stories. I'm sure you remember them. Tom Hanks became an early celebrity COVID case. So did Prince Charles and Greta Thunberg. Every time a celebrity of any sort actually died, headlines were made as public health authorities truthfully pushed hard on the everyone is vulnerable storyline. But when you move toward the whole story, as we all knew from the beginning would be the case, it was the same old story that any pandemic lands hardest on people already living on society's margins: the elderly, Black, Indigenous, and people of color folks, people with limited access to health care, frontline workers who earn too little to take time off from work when they begin to feel symptoms themselves. It's been that way since the beginning, and by both any global measure, the injustices in our response efforts are increasing. The pandemic also introduced new surges in long-standing trends that feed into our disaster creation capacity. In my Friday weekend briefing, I said I would be talking more about gun violence. Well, here's what I have to say. Already armed to the gills, Americans went out and bought still more guns when they began isolating at home, and still more following the police killings of George Floyd and other unarmed Black and Asian Americans. So I'm this much of the way through the sermon. In case you didn't notice, I've yet to say anything about its title, The Uses of Catastrophe. That title, like one of Mary Oliver's shells, is shattered on a beach. They are part of the whole story of our relationship to Earth that we need to read into the destruction we see to live out our UU values. We get some credit for not completely caving into our worst instincts as a society. We changed presidents and control of Congress in favor however slightly so, of leaders who take the pandemic seriously. And they also take most of our other global scale crises more seriously, if investment in public funds and government service in addressing them are any measure. I think it's fair to say we've also taken delight where we could, and most of us have kept our sense of humor. We've become very creative about that, I think. I hope you all saw the story this week about Sarah Studley, the 39-year-old Baltimore woman who repurposed the dress she planned to wear to her wedding last fall. The formal marriage service had been replaced by a private COVID-safe visit to a justice of the peace in work clothes. She then planned to wear the dress to a delayed wedding reception this summer. But when she and her husband decided recently that the reception too would have to be canceled, Sarah Studley came up with a new idea. She wore the dress this week to get her first vaccine shot at Baltimore's downtown football stadium. That gesture thrilled the healthcare workers dispensing the shot. Some of you will have joined our Shakespeare specialist, Professor Doug Richards, in recognizing that my title for this sermon is a play on a phrase from Shakespeare's romantic comedy, As You Like It, where a character speaks of the uses of adversity. The character is a duke whose claim to the throne has been usurped by his younger brother. He has fled to Arden Forest, and to his surprise, has found some advantages to exile in the wilderness. Sweet are the uses of adversity, he says of the discomforts and dangers of living in the woods. For this our life, exempt from public haunt, finds tongues in trees, books in the running brooks, sermons in stones, and good in everything. And it's true that many of us, through privilege and luck, are finding elements of sweetness in our current adversities. But we don't inhabit romantic comedy. Our adversity is spilling into catastrophe, especially for marginalized people. Or to say it more clearly, more catastrophe. Over 400 years of enslavement, followed by another century and a half of diverse oppressions, isn't a form of adversity for Black Americans, it's an ongoing catastrophe. Our climate crisis is a different catastrophe story, but no less alarming. I will say only one thing about that, which I hope turns out to be an aside. Earth itself doesn't currently appear as one of the villains in our climate crisis story, but such a plot twist is possible. We've had a uniquely stable 10,000 years in which all of modern civilization has developed. But ice cores in Greenland and other evidence suggest multiple periods before that, where temperatures have swung further in a matter of decades, just decades, than anything projected for the end of this century, even if we essentially give up on trying to limit gases that contribute to global warming and climate volatility. It's been worse without our help in the past. And there's always the possibility of wandering into the path of another asteroid that can quickly wipe out 75% of the plant and animal species on Earth, as it did 66 million years ago. So catastrophe is part of the whole story. What would humans do? What would we find out about ourselves if we encountered such a catastrophe? I doubt that anyone would be saying sweet are its uses. But I want to invite you this morning to consider that we are ultimately armed with a spiritual power that should not be underestimated, ever. I won't begin to describe the full extent of that spiritual power as I understand it, but I want to leave you with its calling card, or an example of its calling card. The power of committed love within us that gives birth to words like Reverend Victoria Safford's invocation, The Gates of Hope, our second reading, and it goes like this. Our mission is to plant ourselves at the gates of hope.
Not the prudent gates of optimism, which are somewhat narrower, not the stalwart, boring gates of common sense.
nor the strident gates of self-righteousness, which creak on shrill and angry hinges. People cannot hear us there. They cannot pass through.
Nor their cheerful, flimsy garden gate of everything is going to be all right.
But a different, sometimes lonely place, the place of truth-telling, about your own soul first of all and its condition.
The place of resistance and defiance. The piece of ground from which you see the world both as it is and as it could be, as it will be.
The place from which you glimpse not only the struggle, but the joy of the struggle.
And we stand there, beckoning and calling, telling people what we are seeing.
Asking people what they see. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
You and I are the wreckers whose lifestyle left a beach strewn with death that Mary Oliver noticed and realized it was just part of this larger story. We are the creators of global catastrophes present and no doubt more to come. Life will find uses for the catastrophes we create, but we are capable of leading that recreation impulse in ways that no other life form can. We are capable of believing it matters to the universe in ways that no other life form on Earth can. Perhaps no other life form in the universe, we can't know that. We are capable of learning from catastrophe who we are at our best. Let us be grateful for that unique and amazing gift and devote our time together as a congregation to nurturing it in the spirit of love-giving life and life-giving love. Blessed be. Thank you so much for being here this morning. It's wonderful to look out and see your little thumbnails. I dream of the day when I can look out and see your real faces and your body language in the sanctuary and talk to you in person afterwards. Every week that passes is a week closer to that day. And meanwhile, we have important, wonderful work to do to make sure that everything that's going on in the world that day is closer to what our values tell us is the world we want. I invite you to join with me with all your creativity and passion and joy and zest for a good laugh in making that happen in the weeks and months to come. Blessed be.